The frost clung to the windows of Jacob Holt's cabin, a brittle shroud that glittered faintly in the dawn's gray light. He rose before the sun, as he always did, his breath clouding in the chill of the Wyoming prairie. The ache in his shoulders was a familiar companion, but today it felt heavier, as if the weight of 6 months without Sarah, his wife, his anchor, had settled deeper into his bones. He pulled on his boots, the leather creaking, and stepped outside to split wood. The axe bit into the logs with a satisfying thud, and for a moment the rhythm drowned out the grief that gnawed at him. Sweat beaded on his brow despite the cold, and his chest burned with exertion. This was when he felt clean, when his hands were busy, when his body screamed, when the memories of Sarah's laughter, her soft humming, had no space to take root. The cabin sat low between two hills, its roof sagging under the memory of last winter's snow. Smoke curled from the chimney, thin and pale, carrying the faint scent of pine. Inside, the hearth still held traces of Sarah's lavender soap, though her hands no longer tended the fire. Her shawl lay draped over the chair, untouched, a silent monument to her absence. Jacob couldn't bring himself to move it. He didn't need to. By mid-morning, he saddled his gelding, Rusty, and rode toward the west field to check the fence line. The cattle had been restless, their heads tilted as if catching a scent on the wind. Jacob's rifle hung over his shoulder, not because he expected trouble, but because trouble had a way of finding you when your guard was down. His heart was steady, but his eyes scanned the horizon, wary of the quiet. The prairie stretched wide and empty, the willow brake near the old creek a dark smudge against the snow-dusted ground. That's when he saw them. At first, he thought it was a pile of rags, windblown and snagged on the fence. But as Rusty's hooves crunched closer, the shapes sharpened into something human. Two figures, huddled together, one cradling the other with a stillness that made Jacob's stomach lurch. He dismounted, his boots sinking into the frost, and approached slowly. The taller figure stirred, a woman, her skin rich as the earth, her hair tangled with snow. Her face was gaunt, a bruise blooming along her jaw, her lips cracked and bloodless. She didn't look at him. Her eyes were fixed on the child in her arms, a girl no older than 8, thin as a blade of grass, her bare feet blue with cold. The girl's eyes were open, dark and unblinking, like polished coal. "God," Jacob whispered, his voice rough as gravel. His heart thudded, torn between instincts, ride for help or ride away. He knew what it meant to find a native woman on his land, injured, uninvited. He knew the whispers that would follow, the judgment, the danger. But then the girl blinked, just once, her gaze locking onto his. It wasn't fear or hope. It was something deeper, something that pierced him like a blade. He saw himself in her eyes, grieving, hungry, lost. He unhooked his canteen, the metal cold against his palm, and offered it to the woman. Her fingers trembled as she took it, water spilling down her chin as she drank. The girl sipped too, her lips slowly regaining color. Jacob stood, his mind racing. He could leave them here. He could. But those eyes followed him, and he felt the weight of his own solitude, the hollow ache of a life half-lived. "Come on," he said, his voice softer than he meant. He didn't expect them to move, but the woman nodded, her strength faltering as she tried to stand. Jacob stepped forward before he could stop himself, steadying her. She was light as a reed, but heavy with something unspoken, something that tugged at the earth itself. He lifted the girl with one arm. She didn't resist, her body limp but warm. They rode back in silence, 3 souls and a horse, their breath steaming in the cold. The cabin warmed quickly as Jacob stoked the fire. He laid out blankets, and the woman eased onto the rug, still clutching her daughter. Her belly was swollen, he noticed now, too far along for her to be traveling in this cold, alone. "Name?" he asked, not expecting an answer. She looked at him, her voice like a whisper through dry grass. "Nia?" She touched the girl's hair. "Lila." Jacob nodded, his throat tight. He didn't ask what had happened, not yet. The answers felt too raw, too dangerous. He gave them broth, thin but hot. Lila ate carefully, her manners precise despite her hunger. Nia was slower, her hands shaking. Later, he set out a basin for them to wash and left one of Sarah's dresses outside the door, soft flannel, blue, with faded embroidery. By dusk, it was gone. They slept by the hearth. Lila curled like a fawn, her breath puffing small clouds in the lamplight. Nia lay beside her, one hand always on her daughter's back, as if afraid she might vanish. Jacob sat outside that night, the stars sharp and silver above. He smoked his pipe, though the taste was bitter. His heart was a tangle of guilt and resolve. He thought of Sarah, her voice, her smile, the way she'd braid her hair before bed. Naya didn't smile, but there was a softness in her, wrapped in steel, that reminded him of his wife. He didn't know why he'd brought them back. Maybe he just couldn't bear to watch something else die. Morning came with golden light through the shutters. Nia was already awake, boiling water, moving with slow purpose. Jacob poured her coffee, and she nodded thanks. Lila ate cornbread in small bites, her eyes brighter now. They said little, but something unspoken passed between them, like survivors of the same fire, still smelling of ash. Later, Nia fed the chickens while Lila followed Jacob to repair a fence post. She didn't speak, just watched, her small hands steady as she handed him a nail. She missed once, then hit it square. Jacob's chest warmed with quiet pride. That night, he opened Sarah's journal, her name etched on the inside cover. He hadn't written in it since her funeral. With a slow hand, he wrote 3 names: Nia, Lila, Hope. The question mark felt honest. He closed the book and looked to the fire. Nia was brushing Lila's hair, humming a tune he didn't know, soft, ancient, like a lullaby from the earth itself. Lila's eyes drifted closed. The wind whispered against the windows, and for the first time in months, Jacob didn't feel alone. The cabin wasn't haunted anymore. It was shared. Days unfolded with quiet rhythm. Nia wove scraps of fabric into patterns that told stories Jacob couldn't read. Lila trailed him like a shadow, learning to oil a saddle, to check Rusty's hooves. Her laughter, when it came, was like water breaking through stone, sudden, wild, beautiful. But Jacob noticed Nia's eyes drifting to the road, her hand resting on her belly like a shield. She was watching for something, or someone. One evening, as Nia tended the chickens, Jacob leaned on the fence. "You're not just passing through?" he said quietly. "No," she replied, her voice steady but heavy. She set down the eggs and straightened. "They took us, in the snow, my husband's camp. We were waiting for spring, but men came, white men, drunk, angry." Her hand touched her belly. "He fought, died quick. They chased us for 3 days." Jacob's jaw tightened, his heart a storm of rage and sorrow. "They want to own what they broke, their Mavdot," she said, her eyes meeting his. "I won't let them. I won't send you away," he said, his voice firm. She blinked, and that was all. The next morning, they resumed their work, but the air felt heavier. Nia began weaving faster, her fingers deft and urgent. Lila watched Jacob more closely, as if memorizing him. He taught her to hammer nails, to tie knots, his heart aching with the knowledge that she was preparing for a world that might demand too much of her. Then came the rider. Jacob saw him at the edge of the field, a shadow on the horizon. The mark on his saddle, a coiled snake, sent a chill through him. Not local, not friendly. He stood on the porch, thumb tracing the grip of his rifle, his pulse steady but cold. Inside, Nia stirred the pot. Lila braided string into a doll's hair. They didn't ask what he'd seen, but Nia's eyes met his, and for the first time, she looked ready. The ground softened as spring took hold, grass piercing the frost like a promise. The creek whispered again, and the animals grew restless, sensing the shift. Inside the cabin, change was delicate. Nia hummed more often, her voice weaving through the silence. Lila's steps grew bold, her laughter freer. They planted potatoes together, Lila drawing swirls in the dirt, a crown of weeds on her head. Jacob called her Little Chief, and her grin lit his heart like a flame. One evening, Nia stood in the doorway, the sunset carving her face in gold and shadow. Jacob brought her tea, their fingers brushing. "Do you know what my name means?" she asked. He shook his head. "It means life," she said, her lips curving slightly. "Seems foolish, maybe, with all the sorrow, but names don't lie." Jacob stared at the horizon. Maybe sorrow's just the ground joy grows in. Her hand rested briefly on his arm, and his heart stirred, something like longing, something like peace. The night of the storm came suddenly, the sky green-gray and wild. Thunder rumbled like hooves. Jacob pulled the animals in, Nia gathered supplies. Lila trembled, and Jacob knelt beside her, his voice steady. "You're safe here." They sat by the hearth, a candle's glow trembling but holding. Lila whispered, "Tell us something." Jacob told them about his grandfather, who'd traded chickens for a mule that kicked only on Sundays. It wasn't much, but Lila laughed, and Nia's smile made him feel younger and older all at once. The storm passed, but they stayed close, the cabin a haven against the world. Nia's labor came early, as she'd predicted. Jacob boiled water, lit candles, and paced outside the door, his heart pounding with helpless fear. When she called his name, he went to her, holding her hand, whispering steady things as her body fought and rebuilt itself. She screamed once, then fell silent. And then, a cry, thin and new. Nia laughed through tears. Jacob cradled the child, a boy, blood still wet. Something inside him cracked wide open. Hope, he named him, the word soft with awe. Lila crept in at dawn, whispering her brother's name like a spell. They sat on the porch, all four, the baby asleep in Nia's arms, Lila drawing, Jacob smoking quietly. A hawk soared overhead, and for a moment, all was still. Then he heard it. A hoofbeat, distant, gone. Jacob stood, scanning the hills, his heart cold with certainty. Nia joined him, hope swaddled against her chest. Come, he said. They would not run. They would prepare. The days after Hope's birth were golden, delicate. The cabin pulsed with life. Hope's cries, Lila's stories, Nia's steady presence. But danger lingered. Jacob reinforced the barn, laid traps, polished rifle shells. Nia packed a satchel with care, her movements like a ceremony. Lila watched, her eyes too wide for her age. They came at dawn. 3 riders, 2 rough and drunk on confidence, the third cautious, a snake stitched into his vest. Jacob stood in the yard, rifle over his shoulder, his heart a drum. Nice piece of land, the leader called. Not for sale, Jacob said. The man laughed. Came to collect something or someone. Not yours to take. Nia stepped into the doorway, hope pressed tight against her. The man's grin faltered. She's still breathing. Tough. Jacob's voice dropped. Say that again. The man sneered. Jacob fired. The horse reared, the man fell, shoulder torn. Chaos erupted. One charged, his horse caught in a snare. The third froze, then fled. Gunfire rang out. A bullet splintered the fence post beside Jacob. He returned fire. Silence followed, smoke curling from the barrel. Nia's voice came trembling. Jacob? He turned. She stood, tears on her cheeks, hope unharmed. Lila peeked from the barn. It's done, he said, his voice hollow. They buried the bodies at the field's edge, marking the graves with stones. Lila placed wildflowers on each, her face unreadable. Later, they sat at the table, hope asleep between them. Nia's hand covered Jacob's. You stayed, she said. You made it worth staying, he replied. Spring settled fully, the land blooming. They planted together, Lila lining seeds like soldiers, hope crying when the wind blew too hard. Nia's laughter rang like bells. But Jacob kept the rifle near, trained Lila to clean it, watched Nia throw knives with deadly grace. Danger never vanished. It only wandered. One day, a marshal knocked, hat in hand. Heard you had trouble, bodies found on the ridge trail. Jacob met his eyes. It's finished. The marshal nodded and left. That night, Jacob sat on the porch, fireflies dancing in the distance. Nia joined him, their knees touching. You've changed, she said. So have you. She whispered, you ever think about forever? I used to think it was a lie, he said. Now I think it's 1,000 small choices. A door opened, a child named Hope. She leaned into him, her lips brushing his temple. Then let's keep choosing. They found joy in the ordinary. Warm bread, Lila's songs, Hope's smiles. One night a storm rolled in, but no one feared. They huddled by the fire, Hope in Jacob's arms. Nia whispered, tell me something true. Love doesn't come easy, he said. Sometimes it's silence, sacrifice, staying when you want to run, but it's there if you choose it. She smiled. Then we're rich in it. He kissed her, slow and sure, anchoring himself to the moment. The fire crackled, rain danced, and Hope yawned. Outside, the storm passed. Inside, their world began. The prairie exhaled, the violence fading like wheel ruts in the rain. The cabin stood, a haven forged by fire and held by love. Jacob knew danger might return, but for now, they had this. A family, a home, a forever made of small, stubborn choices. If this story touched your heart, join us at One Kind Moment for more tales of hope and resilience. Subscribe today and become part of our community, where every story is a step toward healing.